Hello everybody and welcome to this session. I'm sorry I can't join you in person, but I'm joining you virtually to guide you through and to talk to you about Harrow Early Years Education, its importance and what we want to achieve with you and your children as part of the Harrow family. My name is Jan Dubiel. I'm an early years specialist. I've worked in early years for over 30 years as a kindergarten teacher, as a government advisor, as a trainer, as a writer, and as a policymaker. So I'm delighted to be part of this project and delighted to be part of the Harrow family of schools. My role here is as executive principal of Little Lions. So I have a responsibility for looking at the quality and the experience that children receive when they come to Harrow Little Lions Kindergarten. What we want to do today is answer 3 questions and give you some information to help you inform your choice about sending your child to Harrow Little Lions. So the first question is really looking at why early years is so important. What do we know from research? What do we know from evidence about the impact of experiences for young children in their kindergarten age? And that's something I want to talk about in detail. The second thing we want to talk about is what do we know about high quality early years provision? So one of the things I'll talk about is the importance of quality, the importance of the quality of types of experiences that children have. So part of our presentation will be looking at what we know is required for that to be effective. And finally, what is the Harrow approach to realising this? And that's really important because the Harrow family of schools comes from a long tradition of educational excellence. We like to think our philosophy is both acknowledging the past and the hundreds of years of traditions that we come from, but also being very aware of the future. What does the future hold for the children that will come to our schools? How do we best prepare them to be good citizens? How do we embed them with our values, the value-driven education that we provide? Because learning is around academic excellence, of course, and that's very important to us, but it's also about the nature of what children become, the people they become, the citizens they become, the responsibilities they have. And part of our educational philosophy is very much to shape that responsibility into the experience that they have. So the Harrow approach rests on what we know about early years and why it's so important, but it also draws from our long history and our long set of traditions. And that's why we think the Harrow experience will be the best kind of experience for very young children. So the question I want to explore is why early years is so important. Why do those earliest years really matter? And what do we know about the importance that they have on lifetime chances? Well, we know that there are types of experiences and types of learning and types of teaching that really impact on long-term development. The kindergarten years quite literally lay the foundations for success. So through high quality kindergarten provision, we provide those experiences, we provide the foundations for lifetime achievement. Not just academically, although that is really important and that's one of our core beliefs and one of our core ambitions for children, but also in the virtues and attributes and the personalities of children to make them as successful, as responsible, and as powerful as they can be. Recent developments in neuroscience have given us a much stronger insight into how learning works. And as a consequence of that, we understand a lot more about how critical that is for very young children. The basis of learning is through neural activity, through synapses and dendrites that connect things together. So every experience, everything you see or touch or hear creates a neurological connection which you then manage and connects to other things. So the more experiences children have, the more those connections are made. On this picture, you can see the strength or the number of those connections. So the very first one is from a very young baby that's just been born. The middle one is from a 7-year-old, and the last one is from a child in their adolescence, in their 14-year-old. Now, as you can see from that, at age of 7, the child has the maximum number of neurological connections they can have. From birth to 7, the brain grows at an extraordinary rate that is never replicated throughout their life. Each new experience is connected, turns into a connection, a neurological connection. So the more different experiences that children have, the more connections they make, and that's the basis of learning. The reason this is so critical in early years is because round about the age of 7, something significant happens. The brain goes through a process of pruning. What the brain does is it strengthens the connections it has, but it gets rid of connections that you don't use very much. And that's why there are less connections at age 14 than there are at 7, but the connections they have are much stronger. What this means in practice is that the connections children make, the experience they have to be meaningful to them and have to be ones that they can connect with other experiences. And this has a big implication on the way children are taught, because it needs to fit around this way that they learn. And that has a big impact on how we work with young children from birth to 7. It lays the foundation for future learning. Everything that happens later on, when they go on to do exams and when they go on to do degrees, rests on these first experiences, because it lays the foundations for future learning. And the more we get that right, the more we optimize the possibilities of high-level learning later on. So the other dimension to exploring this question is what we know from research and what we know from the impact of early years provision, kindergarten provision, on later outcomes for children. So about 10-15 years ago, a big research study started in the UK, which took about 3,000 children and looked at what happened to them when they were in their earliest years, their kindergarten years, and then followed those children as they went through primary school and secondary school and on into adulthood. So the chart you can see here shows the outcomes for those children in their literacy and their mathematics at age 11. Now, the important thing about this chart is it shows the relationship of those outcomes with the quality of the early years provision that they attended. So the higher the quality of that provision, the more likely they were to get good outcomes just in maths and literacy at age 11 and above. Again, what this tells us is that going to a kindergarten in itself isn't enough, but the quality of that kindergarten has a dramatic impact on those children's outcomes. Because the very lowest bar chart on there shows children who went to a low quality kindergarten, and the very highest ones show the outcomes for children who went to a high quality kindergarten. So just attending isn't enough. The quality really, really matters. So the big question here is, well, what is quality? How do we know what quality is? And how do we make sure we provide for that? So another piece of research, which was done quite recently, was to pull together everything we found out in the last 10 years. From neuroscience, from studies, from comparisons, different international comparisons, all the different researches that were done were pulled together to look at what were the indicators of later success. In order for children to be successful, to be the best they can be, to be the future leaders, the future successful people that we want for our children, what are the kind of things that really matter in early years? So what this slide shows was the outcomes and the conclusions of that research. And it identified several areas which were critical to later success. What research showed was when these things were in place in children's kindergarten years and they were secure, those children were likely to be successful. And conversely, if these things weren't given the attention they needed, then those children had a reduced chance of being successful. So this, in effect, is what our curriculum needs to be based on. And it talks about things like language, things like social skills, things like the ability to cooperate. It talks about self-regulation, which is ability to manage emotions. It talks about metacognition, which is the ability to think around problems. It talks about executive functioning, which is how we organise and manage our thoughts. So all these attributes, all these aspects of curriculum need to be at the centre stage of what we provide for children in kindergarten. Because research tells us when those are secure, by the time they transfer to elementary school, those children have an optimised chance of being successful. So let's consider for a minute what we want for our children, and also what kind of world the children are going to go into. Because surely our responsibility as a society and as educators is to make sure our children are prepared and are going to be successful in the world that they go into. So this quote by Sir Ken Robinson says, "No other period in human history can match the present in terms of its technological change." So we are preparing children for jobs that don't exist, for technologies that haven't even been invented, and for problems that we don't even know are problems yet. If we've learned anything over the past year, is the world can be very unpredictable. What we assume or what we take for granted can change sometimes quite drastically, and we have to adapt to do that. The world that the children are going into will be, in some ways, a world we can't even conceive of yet. There'll be technologies that haven't been invented. There will be issues and challenges which we can't even see yet. There is a Chinese proverb, when the winds of change blow, some people build walls and other people build windmills. And part of our philosophy is to be the windmill maker, to harness those challenges, but to ensure that our children are fully prepared for what comes before them. So that means what we teach them and how we teach them has to link into to be flexible and adaptable and innovative and creative and responsible, because those are both values we hold dear, but those are also attributes which will ensure they will be successful going forward. But this isn't just about individual achievement and individual attainment and individual success. This is how a nation and a community fuse together. This UNICEF quote talks about choices and actions taken during this critical period not only affect a child, but also how a country progresses. The future of nations, the future of civilizations, depends on the children that we shape in order to be part of it. The children in kindergarten today will be running the world in 30 to 40 years' time. They will be the innovators, the entrepreneurs, they will be the architects, they will be the politicians, the policymakers, they will be the doctors and the actors and the singers and the dramatists. They will be the people who make the world what it is. So our responsibility is to shape those experiences, to enable them to contribute to that, and to enable them to create a world that they will be proud of and that we will be proud of having created with them. So how does that distill into where we are? How does that distill into what we have to offer you? In a moment, I'm going to hand over to Francesca Hertzing, who is a principal of Little Lions, and she will talk about how this works in practice. But before we do that, I want to just identify the result of everything I've talked about so far. What we know about neuroscience, what we know about what we want for children, what we know really works for children, and what we know about our responsibility to prepare them. It gives us a set of attributes, it gives us a set of skills and knowledges and aspects of personality which we think are really important. So Harrow has a core set of values. It has values of honour and courage and humility and fellowship. And those traditional values underpin the kinds of attributes and virtues that we want for our children. So while we draw from this long tradition, this hundreds of years old tradition, we are still looking to the future. And that future has a seamless link with the past. So this tells us about the kinds of learners, the kind of aspirations we have for children, children who are skilled and knowledgeable, children who have the highest academic standards. That is the core of us as a Harrow School family. But also that they are independent, they are creative, they are highly motivated, they are responsible, they are risk takers, they are persistent, they are effective communicators, they are resilient. These are all things which will set them up to be successful in life, whatever path, whatever career path they choose. Those qualities will ensure that whatever they do, they will do with leadership, they will do with humility, fellowship, courage and honour. And when that happens, we know that we have successfully transferred those children from childhood into adult life.